Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. It's deeply appreciated. I'd like to thank CNBC Africa for today's interview. That was a crossover with South Africa. I'd like to thank Mr. Munir Ahmed, the CEO of National Bank, who was a splendid guest. We're in the edit suite and we'll post the session later this week. I'll put up a panorama photograph I took of Munir at Mindspeak on Saturday. Macro thoughts, obviously you can see why it's uppermost on my mind, but I said the dashboard is blinking amber. Safaricom CEO Bob Collymore has proven to be such an outstanding wealth creator for his shareholders, and whose more than 50% year-on-year dividend increase, brackets, which remains the loudest signal in the earnings release, close brackets, is surely resonating around the world, has a dashboard that sits on his PC. At the first level, it has a color scheme where green is good and red is bad. You can drill into what is driving the dashboard. It is a real-time computer algorithm. Now put yourself in front of that dashboard and let's start reading it. Ambassador Robert Godek said additional police are already patrolling around the embassy and that more assets will arrive from Washington next week. Unfortunately, the security situation in Kenya, especially in Nairobi and Mombasa, continues to worsen since the tragic events of Westgate in September 2013. The number of attacks, threats, and warnings is deeply concerning, he said, and my source is Jason Strazuzio of Associated Press. The dashboard is telling us that the frequency and the intensity of attacks is spiking. Subsequent to that letter, twin improvised explosive devices exploded in Gikomba, killing 10 people and wounding more than 70. Nairobi is the largest US diplomatic facility in East Africa, and the embassy has about 1,300 employees or more inside it on any given day. Godek said he is reducing the embassy's overall footprint in Kenya by reducing the number of Americans stationed in Nairobi. If Nairobi represents close to 50% of Kenya's GDP, then the Muthaiga-Gigiri economy surely represents up to a quarter of that 50%. The Muthaiga-Gigiri economy is flashing red on the dashboard. One of my friends from Mombasa called me Thursday and told me they are evacuating my guests. Tourism is one of the pillars, more than $1 billion pillar, of our economy. I will recall the president described tourism as being on its knees. It's capitulated now. Mombasa was already a tinderbox, and a full-blown recession is like lighting a match next to that tinderbox. Don DeLillo writes in Point Omega, when you strip away surfaces, when you see into it, what's left is terror. This is the thing that literature was meant to cure, the epic poem, The Bedtime Story. I embraced social media in 2009, and it has become quite a passion and even a business now. We scan the real time and measure, sometimes try and shape, but we're measuring responses to brands across the continent. There is an enormous conversation and hullabaloo going on, and we search this for signals. And the signal is very loud and clear and unanimous. We are being spun an epic poem, The Bedtime Story. Disbelief can be suspended, of course, but eventually we reach a Marx Brothers in duck soup moment. Well, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? And if you mind social media like I do, you will know that duck soup moment was crossed during Westgate. And continuing resolutely down this path is eroding political capital. I leave you with a quote from Malcolm Gladwell. Look at the world around you. It may seem like an immovable, implacable place. It is not. With the slightest push in just the right place, it can be tipped. Everything is looking extremely fragile in my view. I'll put up an image of the Point Omega book and give you one other quote from it. the true life is not reducible to words spoken or written, not by anyone, ever. Dearest Hannah had a lovely day on Saturday, celebrating her birthday, a little belatedly, admittedly. Her grandfather flew up from Mombasa as well, especially for it. Political reflections, the reason for the schizophrenic quality of Chinese behavior, I suspect, has to do with what China thinks US intention and strategy toward it might be. China's big worry is the US and its partners will block China's access to strategic trade routes through the South China Sea. That's what I've been talking about for a while, and I think that's essentially what the pivot's all about. However, although Vietnam has confronted China in the waters, I agree with this comment that Vietnam also realizes that it's quite impossible to confront China in a very sustainable way. China has become the number 2 power. Ben Rhodes tweeted the following: after the largest democratic election in history, US congratulates the BJP for its victory and looks forward to working closely with the new government. So I think essentially it's a clean slate for Modi. And then I saw this photograph that John Kerry tweeted on May 15th, met with London 11 partners, were united in commitment in changing the dynamics in Syria. And just look at the photograph and count how many have come from the region. Apparently there's a report via The Independent that there's a book to be released which postulates that the MH370 was shot down in a military training exercise. International markets, there is uncertainty surrounding presidential elections in Ukraine and rising tensions between China and Vietnam. It's not an environment where investors want to aggressively take risks. Currency markets, Euro 137.04, touched 136.48 on May the 15th, and that was the lowest since February 27. Dollar index 80.01, the Japanese yen 101.42, gained 0.7% in the previous 3 sessions, touched 101.32 on May 15, which was the strongest since March 19, good proxy for risk aversion. Swiss franc 0.8915, the pound 168.22, the Aussie 0.9351, Indian rupee 58.52 surged 2.1% last week and was the best performer amongst 78 global currencies tracked by Bloomberg. South Korean won back at a multi-year high, 1022.75, Rial 221.42, Egyptian pound 713.49, and the South African rand 1034.92. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. Obviously, the FOMC have reduced monthly bond buying to $45 billion. This is down from $85 billion when the Fed started trimming purchases in December. Yellen is scheduled to give the New York University commencement speech on May 21st. With the dollar index, you'll see from the chart, it's struggled to get above this 820, 815 level, which is where the congestion lies, and I think for now it remains capped by that. Euro dollar 137.04, and this has come off just shy of 140 not too long ago, but Mario Draghi has signaled he may add monetary stimulus in June. And I extrapolated from a conversation that I had with Lorenzo Binsmaghi, who was once an ECB member, that really Draghi is a racing certainty to add stimulus in June. I'll put up a photograph of Lorenzo Binsmaghi. He's the man in the middle. And then I came across this saying Draghi isn't doubted as economists await ECB stimulus measures. 90% of economists in the Bloomberg monthly survey predict the ECB president will ease monetary policy in June, after saying on May 8th that officials are comfortable with acting then. Draghi pre-committed, said Elvin de Groot, an economist at Rabobank. And I wrote about Draghi in September 2012 when I called him Super Mario, the Euro's savior. And I was saying, the biggest impact on interest rates is, of course, the central banker. I actually enjoy studying and parsing the semantics, the language, the emphases of central bankers. You have to weigh every nuance with the same care you might hold a Fabergé egg. The personality of a central bank is also key, has to be compelling and never underwhelming. And then I was referring to, I was visiting them in Switzerland, and this confidence that I've sensed amongst businessmen about Mario Draghi. And I just said that, I think he is the secret I said then he was the secret silver bullet for the euro, and he's proved so to be. He said then we designed a parkour road and it's in the hands of governments. And indeed he did design a parkour road, and Europe continues to work its way through that parkour that he pointed out. I'll put up a photograph of it. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar yen, 101.42, and risk aversion mode in the global markets right now. Gold 1295.83. The price action, I think, might be presaging a sharp move lower. Crude oil 101.73. I think it's expensive at these levels. I like this photograph of a spread of food at Caviar, that I found in the Wall Street Journal. There's a scene in Anna Karenina in which Oblonsky, Anna's brother, an irrepressible man about town, bounds into his favorite Moscow restaurant, accompanied by his compatriot, the more earthbound Levine, who is fresh from his country estate. Levine, in awe of the restrained radiance that immediately takes over his friend's entire being, watches Oblonsky direct the Tartar waiters, greet acquaintances joyously, and help himself to a preliminary appetizer of fish and vodka. When he finally takes a seat amid the fuss and the bustle, the surroundings of bronzes, mirrors, gaslights, he orders a bottle of champagne. Tolstoy may have published his novel's first installment in 1875. That particular scene, or one awfully close to it, is still reenacted countless times a day and night, 6 days a week, at Caviar Caspia, the quixotically chic restaurant in Paris's 8th arrondissement on the Place de la Madeleine. Well, I'm certainly hungry. Narendra Modi's BJP party got 282 of 543 parliamentary seats, compared with 272 needed to form a government. This is the biggest single-party majority since 1984. And because of that decisive victory, you've seen this very strong reaction. I'll put up a one-year chart of the India rupee. I think we're still going to go to 57.50, which was a level I put out a few weeks ago. And the Bombay Sensex is back at all-time highs. I'll put up a chart of that, a long-term one from Yahoo. Sub-Saharan Africa, West African leaders vow to wage total war on Boko Haram. Nigeria's neighbors Chad, Cameroon, Niger, Benin, and Western officials met in Paris to flesh out a plan enabling them for the first time to share intelligence, coordinate action, and monitor borders. Boko Haram is no longer a local terrorist group. It is operating clearly as an Al-Qaeda operation. It is an Al-Qaeda of West Africa. That was good luck, Jonathan. He was really an extraordinary fellow. It took him 3 weeks to say anything about those girls. It was just extraordinary. There is determination to tackle this situation head-on, to launch a war, a total war on Boko Haram, said Chad's President Idris Deby. Now I refer you back to that comment that Abu Bakr Shakar made when he said, speaking to Good Luck Jonathan, we are in your city. And frankly, that comment had been made by Al-Shabaab. Both Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab represent very elevated asymmetric risks. And I wrote this on the 22nd of April, where I said the recent bombings in Abuja and last year's attacks on Westgate confirmed the potency of asymmetric risks. African markets have taken these risks in their stride. I said they might stumble if these asymmetric risks ratchet higher. I'll put up a photograph of Francois Hollande, William Hague, Nigerian President Mamadou Issoufou, Chad's President Idris Deby, Good Luck Jonathan, Paul Biya of Cameroon, Benin's Yayi Boni, the ECB President Herman Van Rompuy, US Undersecretary for Political Affairs Wendy Sherman. That was the meeting that was held at the Lycée Palace in Paris, May 17. I also put up a photograph of Westgate that I took, and for me represents the asymmetric risk component about which I've spoken separately. South African all share up 7.79% this year. Dollar versus Rand 10.3506. It's firmer. I think it heads to 10. Egyptian pound's been on the slide, obviously ahead of the election. 7.1349. The Egyptian stock market ticked 0.25% lower yesterday, but it's up 27.61% in 2014, and is the best performing stock index in Africa. Nigeria is down 2.44% this year. The New York Times says a jihadist's face taunts Nigeria from the shadows. That's of course Abu Bakr Shekau, and I'm in your city. The Ghana Stock Exchange is up 5.12% this year, but bear in mind we've had this huge erosion in the current value of the cedi. IFC has issued its first Rwandan local currency bond. The 5-year Umuganda bond, named after the East African country's Day of Community Service, held once a month, issued at a yield of 12.25%, and follows similar issues by the IFC in Nigeria and Zambia last year. Human Rights Watch is carrying a report saying that there's been a spate of enforced disappearances. The authorities in Rwanda disputed the list of 14 names presented by HRW, saying, "I really don't think that can be right. This is too many people." He said, "We are next to the DRC. Some people can leave for the DRC for weeks, days, or even months and not tell others." Banda in a tough race to remain Malawi's president. Afrobarometer saying that we've never really had elections that are this close. They are really hard to call. African Development Bank is saying that they're going to step up funding as China boosts its own role on the continent. Of course, we have a 50-year celebration going on in Rwanda for the AFDB. US Embassy in Kenya requests a security upgrade. This is a report by AP. Has requested additional Kenyan and American security personnel, reducing the size of the embassy staff because of an increase in terrorist threats in Kenya. Godex said additional police are already patrolling around the embassy and that more assets will arrive from Washington next week. The embassy warned Americans this week that it was taking new security steps because of recent threat information. Al-Qaeda, of course, bombed the US embassy in 1998, killing more than 200 people. Unfortunately, the security situation in Kenya, especially in Nairobi and Mombasa, continues to worsen. Since the tragic events of Westgate in September 2013, the number of attacks, threats and warnings is deeply concerning, Godex said. US Embassy, of course, is surrounded by thick walls. Armed Marines, apparently, have recently begun patrolling the grounds, wearing bulletproof vests and helmets. The frequency of emergency drills that tell embassy personnel to duck and cover have also increased. Godex said he's reducing the embassy's overall footprint in Kenya by reducing the number of Americans stationed in Nairobi. If the Americans decide to make a structural adjustment rather than a temporary relocation of staff, then other countries are certain to follow. It shows that they know something and haven't been reassured by the Kenyan authorities, said a European diplomat, and that's the point that I was making. Security forces secure the scene of the site where 2 blasts detonated, one in a minivan used for public transportation in a market area of Nairobi. I'll put up a photograph of that. President Kenyatta said a former US president once said, "You are either with us or against us, but when we are hit, they say, ni shauri yetu, you're on your own," said the president, clearly unhappy. But I think, he also said Kenya is our country, we will develop it, even if they take their tourists, we will look for others, we will fight terrorists, and we will not be cowed. The point being, I think, if you're relying on the West, essentially, for counter-terrorism support, it is naive then, at the same time, to be abusing those very folks who are supporting you, which is the general sense. And I think, on the other side, you've got people who say, we've got information, but we're just not being allowed to share it. And I think that's also why we saw this rash of decisions come out. The Kenyan president says he expects the Eurobond issue by the end of June, in the financial year that ends on June 30. They've also authorized the Treasury to pay $16.1 million This is around this debt. The question is, you lose a case in the international court, notwithstanding that it was so poorly defended that one could argue it was sabotage, but nevertheless you go and lose it in the international court, a decision goes against you, and essentially you've got to pay out, I'm afraid. Tourism arrivals in the country fell to 1.4 million last year from 1.7 million in 2012, are going to be even lower this year. Kenya shilling last trading at 87.463. Nairobi all share up 10.611% in 2014, not far off an all-time high. NSE 20 is up 0.8385%. CMC directors ousted in fresh board shake-up. That was a headline in the Business Daily. Now looking at the stock market, the all-share firm 0.2786% yesterday on Friday, lifted by a rebound in Safaricom, which rebounded 1.984%. NSE 20 closed 22.24 points higher, but it's at 4967. It needs to get over 5,000 to get going again. Safaricom was very strong on Friday, and that's all. The profit-taking move was so light that was really a buy signal. Kenya Airways unchanged at 12.80, but trading lower today. The National Bank was a very strong share on Friday, up 4.6875% to close at 33.50. Portland Cement put out a profits warning. If you want to go to rich data, you can have a look at that profits warning. Kenol Cobil, which traded its highest volume of the year on Thursday, traded heavy volume again on Friday and has rallied about 7.6% over 2 sessions. Once again, thank you for stopping by and wishing you the best for the week.